Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's nice to see some of you here to learn a little bit more about what's around your country and the country we live and work in. And today I present you a study case about Honey Faro Bay. You probably all of you heard about Honey Faro Bay, one of the most special places in the Maldives to see mantas. It's now a protected area. It's within a biosphere reserve. And it's the sole site around the world when mantas aggregate in massive numbers. We talk about peaks of 200, 250 mantas congregating together in a tiny bay. A bay that has been overexploited. Once the publicity brought this bay to the general public around the world, tourism increased dramatically. And so it was important to develop a management plan to make sure the impact were minimized on the population, that tourism was still allowed, but at a point where it was not impacting those wild animals. Before going into the actual Honey Faro case, I will just give a very quick introduction about mantas, although I'm sure most of you already were present during Anne-Marie presentation, but just quickly a refresher about the biology of these animals. We know since 2009 that mantas are actually don't belong to one unique species, but we have actually two species of mantas, both present in the Maldives. The giant oceanic mantas, wingspan of up to 7 meters across. Ocean travelers, they swim throughout entire oceans, and they're rarely seen in shallow waters around the Maldives, but they occasionally do visit the country, especially on cleaning stations. In our database, we have about 70 oceanic mantas recorded, one resighting of an oceanic here actually in North Mali Atoll. But certainly in the Maldives, the majority of the population, about 98%, is made up of the reef manta. Reef manta is much smaller, grows up to 4.5 meters across. It's not an ocean traveler. They're mostly sedentary, so they spend most of their life in a small range. And in the Maldives, they are pretty much resident here. And 98% of the Maldivian population is made up of the small reef manta ray. What do they feed on? Well, they feed exclusively on plankton, on microscopic plankton, so they're filter feeders. They have these massive mouths that moved in the front of their head, differently from other stingrays from which they evolved, that have a ventral mouth. Mantas developed a frontal mouth to be able to filter as much plankton as possible, to capture as much water that is pushed toward the gills, and the plankton is retained. Here's an example of a planktonic soup. Example are copepods, which are very common zooplanktonic animals that mantas love a lot. They're sort of their caviar, if you will. So they feed with their massive mouth wide open. They have two projections in front of the mouth that also devil rays, mobula rays, share with them, which are specific to this family of rays. And these are called cephalic fins. Two cephalic fins help the manta funnel the water toward the mouth in order to maximize the amount of water filtered and plankton retained. These are animals that can eat, on average, 10-15 kilos of plankton a day. So although this is microscopic food, but the Maldivian waters are very rich in it, and mantas take advantage of it, and that's why the Maldives can support such a large population of these rays. I usually say this to guests that visit or ask me about mantas. What do your parents tell you when you were a kid, after dinner and just before going to sleep? What did your parents used to ask you? What was a typical thing you used to do just before going to sleep? Brush your teeth, wash your hands, then go to sleep. But this is something that underwater it cannot be done. First of all, they don't have soap. They don't have their mothers telling them to do it. But they realize themselves how important it is to be clean. Why? Parasites are the main reason of death in the ocean. Parasites are killers, and they will develop on the body of a manta, inside the gills, inside their mouth, very quickly and bring mantas to death. So it's very important for mantas to visit cleaning stations, specific areas and sites with a high density of cleaner wrasse, tiny fish, which you can see in the picture there, that are specialized in feeding on parasites, dead skin. If there's, for example, a bacterial infection spreading, then cleaner wrasse will specifically target it in order to avoid the spreading of an infection. So it's an activity that mantas, as well as other fish, have to do every day for a certain amount of time. Cleaning stations are also very important for reproduction. This is something that we recently sort of discovered. cleaning stations seems to be less active when reproduction is not as intense, and during years where reproduction is very active, very intense again, then cleaning stations are highly visited by mantas. This is because cleaning stations are places where mantas aggregate, so large females can be present for hours, and males are sure that they will find their partners there. And this is where most of mating activity, courtship behavior is observed throughout the country. It's always on cleaning stations. And curiously, major cleaning stations are visited only by adult individuals. Juveniles tend to live in shallow lagoons and visit small cleaning stations which can only be just a coral block, which acts as a cleaning station for juveniles. Briefly about reproduction, as I told you, happens on cleaning stations, and this is an example of a mating train. What happens is large females start a sort of a dance underwater. It's something fascinating to observe. It's a way, of course, for the female to select the fittest male. So as soon as the female is ready to mate, by probably releasing sort of some hormones, the male will perceive that female is ready to mate, and they will start chasing her in a proper dance in a train of mantas that can be up to 15, 20 males following one unique female. I've seen a video from Hawaii of 35 males following one female. So it's a real fight, something that we also sometimes have to go through. It's a dance that can last even for days until obviously the strongest, the fittest of the males will get access to the female. So it's a process that is known as sexual selection. Basically, the female selects this way the fittest male, and will make sure that the partner will be someone who will be able to bring her good offspring. The mating itself has been rarely observed in nature, but we have a few footages, shots as you can see up there. Curiously, the male manta approaches the female from the back and always slides on the left side of the body. There's a lateral preference among mantas for the left side of the body. So the male slides on the left, as you can see here, and then bites very hardly the left pectoral fin of the female. Why does it bite? Because the female probably doesn't really enjoy the mating, the copulation itself, so it has to make sure the female is firmly attached to his body. The mate slides underneath the female, insert the claspers. It's an internal fertilization. It's an act that lasts only for a few seconds, and it happens at the surface because mantas, as they stop swimming, they sink. They're negatively buoyant. So during mating, they slowly sink underwater. Once copulation is finished, then each one goes on their own. A curious thing, I'm not sure you're aware of, but mantas have teeth. Although they are filter feeders, so they eat only on plankton, they don't really need their teeth to feed, but the teeth are retained for mating. So males actually bite very hardly on the female, and thanks to the teeth, the male can keep the female close to himself. They're very small, only 1 or 2 millimeters long, but they're very important for mating. And those teeth also leave some signs after mating, which are called mating scars. The ones you can see here in these pictures, black and white spots on the left side of the body, so that the biting of the male scratches away the skin, creates some wounds that as they heal, they leave scars that are left for the entire life. So these are also signs important for scientists to tell if a female we're observing is a mature individual, is a juvenile individual, and we can also compare mating scars over the years to see how often they mate. So these are important informations about the reproduction and mating behavior of these animals. Newborn manta is already a giant, and that's why you will never see a tiny 10 centimeters, 15 centimeters mantas. They are born already 1.5 meters across minimum. Mantas give birth to only one pup at a time, which is already independent from the moment they're born. So there are no parental caring among these animals. The sad side of the story are the threats to manta rays, and not only mantas, but also their cousins, if you will, mobula rays, the 9 species of devil rays or mobula rays called. Well, obviously, one of the major threats to these animals is by catch, basically catching an animal which is not directly targeted. And this is mainly due by fishing lines, fishing nets that drift around the water, abandon, or even put there in place to target something else. But obviously, anything that swims in it will get caught, from mantas to sharks to dolphins, etc. The Maldives is an example of sustainable fishery. In this country, nets are banned, so there's no net fishing beside the nets used for bait fish, which are very selective and will never catch anything else. But elsewhere in the world, massive nets are still used, nets the size so big that they can contain different jumbo jets. So they're hundreds of meters wide nets that just drag into the ocean and catch anything that passes by. Again, turtles, sharks, rays. You can see here a turtle caught in a tuna per se net, gill nets, etc. Often mantas will get entangled and would die of suffocation. On other occasion, they will manage to escape from the net but carry a remnant or part of the net or the fishing line with them, which can then slowly cut through the skin. If you ever try to cut a fishing net with your hand, you probably cut your fingers. They're very hard to cut. And the same things happen on a manta. So as they swim with a fishing net entangled around their body, the fishing net basically cut through the skin just like a cheese wire. So it can reach internal organs and vital organs that can obviously kill the manta, or they can, just like in this picture, cut off a cephalic fin or a pectoral fin, etc. It's not uncommon to see mantas with a missing cephalic fin or part of the pectoral fin chopped up, or signs of fishing nets. So it's not a major problem in the Maldives, but occasionally that happens. The major impact, definitely around the world globally on mantas, and it's something fairly recent, only about in the last 15 years, is the direct fishery. Mantas are directly targeted all around the world, from Africa, Indonesia, Mexico, Thailand, Mozambique. Luckily, again, the Maldives is an example, because since 1995 there is a ban on the trade of mantas and sharks. So mantas are not targeted here, but elsewhere in the world they've been decimated to the point where populations are dropping at the speed of light, especially since this is a very fragile species with a very slow growing and reproductive rate. What is the reason for this directed fishery? Is the growing gill plate trade. So Chinese medicine started using manta gill plates, gill rakers, as a medicament, as a tonic. So they make a sort of a soup with it, together with dry pipefish, that is believed to purify the body, to purify the blood, to enhance the immune system. The belief behind it is that what are the gill rakers used for, the manta? What are the gill plates used? They're used to filter the water. So basically what they believe is that as they can filter the water, they can filter our body. This is all it's about. There's obviously no scientific proof of any benefit from consuming gill plates of mantas, but the belief is so high and the demand is growing very fast. Gill rakers are sold for, here you can see the average price of per kilo of manta gill raker, so we're talking about $150, $250, and so they're very priced. And obviously countries where third world countries where fishery is their main activity obviously target mantas on a daily basis. What is the actual conservation status of these animals? Well, there's been a lot done in the past years. They are included into the red list of IUCN as vulnerable. They've been upgraded from near threatened to vulnerable in recent years. Giant oceanic mantas are also included into conservation for migratory species. An important achievement has been reached last year in March 2013 in Bangkok at CITES. Mantas, both species of mantas, oceanic and reef mantas, have been included into the Appendix 2. And this is a very important achievement, because the 175 or so countries that adhere to the convention have to basically control the trade of these animals and make sure that it's sustainable, that it's done in a sustainable way. This is something very new that before was not in place. So now mantas have to be, manta fishery has to be regulated and these animals protected in a way. In Indonesia recently, just a couple of months ago, another great achievement has been reached, and it's the protection of mantas throughout the entire ocean of the country. So Indonesia became the largest sanctuary for mantas all around the world. And this is amazing for a country where manta fishery was actually quite intense. In the Maldives, as I explained, mantas are indirectly protected. There is no national protection for mantas, so they're not included in the list of protected species, but there is a trading ban for these animals. So fishermen don't actually target these animals because they will not be able to sell it overseas. And also, obviously, this country realizes the importance for tourism, and this is where this all brings us to. Maldives live on tourism. It's an island country made up of about 1,200 islands, where tourism boomed in the 70s, and since then it keeps growing at an exponential rate. We reached last year 1 million tourists throughout 2013, And the gross domestic product of the Maldives is made up mostly from tourism activity directly, and obviously secondary services which are related to tourism. So the country realizes the importance of maintaining their natural resources and make sure that tourism keeps the economy up in the country. And a few studies have been done on the importance of mantas to show what is the benefit of keeping them alive instead of dead. And this is the result of one of it. So we compared the value of a manta dead to the price that gill rakers have in the market, and toward the price of a manta alive. So how much a manta is worth alive through direct activities as diving and snorkeling. And these are the values that came out. So every year, worldwide, globally, mantas are worth about $5 million dead for the fishery, for the gill plates, but alive they're worth $140 million. When we talk about the Maldives, in the Maldives every year over $8 million are produced by manta direct tourism. It's a massive amount of money. An alive manta, we calculated, is worth $1 million throughout its life through tourism again, while a dead manta will be worth only those $500, $600 of their gill plates, and that's it. So it's a massive value difference, which it's quite important when we bring these results to government to make management decisions. Just quickly, obviously, because tourism is important here, because mantas are endangered, so we decided to start studying them. Pretty much what you've already heard from Anne-Marie. But we also have a photo identification program, which has been running in the Maldives for about 10 years now. We collected over almost 10 years, more than 25,000 sightings of mantas, and it's by far the largest database of mantas in the world, and a total of over 3,300 different individuals. And we're starting to understand a lot about these animals, from their migratory routes to their site use, population structure, etc. Just quickly an example, this is what the photo identification program brought to understanding about their reproduction behavior. So at first we thought that mantas were mating maybe once every 1-2 years, but after the years of data collection, we actually realized that they mate much less than what expected. So they probably mate every 4, 5, 6 years. This makes the species much more fragile because it doesn't replenish as fast. But obviously, photo ID also tells us a lot about their movements, their population size, structure, site use, etc. All these informations.